Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 392, Through the Dark Sod, as education. Emily will only use the word education twice in all her poetry. First we saw it in poem 3, right at the very beginning of our study, and then here. Of course, Emily as teacher, Emily as educator, Emily as interested in education. Her study of Plato's Republic, especially Book 7, I think will be apparent in this one. Now, this is a poem about education, no doubt, but it's going to take us back to poem 66. Do you guys remember when we did this one? So from the mold, scarlet and gold, many a bulb will rise, hidden away cunningly from sagacious eyes. So from cocoon, many a worm leaps so highland gay, peasants like me, peasants like thee, gaze perplexedly. And I think that there's a whole lot of this idea that what is under the ground, what is buried, education is somehow symbolically this way. And then there's what comes above the ground, out of the ground. When published by the Atlantic Monthly in February of 1929, this poem was already being given a certain sense of word picture power, if you will, and we're going to enjoy it as well. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments as well as our preceding 391 poems. We just finished with 391, A Visitor and Moral. Now, this is a poem, no doubt, about education, the power of growth. It is interesting as well because Emily wrote to Cornelia Swetzer, quote, and this is in a letter 3.775. She said it this way, quote, I have long been a lunatic on bulbs, flowers, yes, though screened by my friends as lunacy on any theme is better undivulged, end quote. Emily loves flowers because they represent so much. In this case, the lily, probably the color lily. Through the dark sod, as education, the lily passes sure, feels her white foot, no trepidation, her faith, no fear. Afterward, in the meadow, swinging her barrel bell, the mold life all forgotten now in ecstasy and dell. Now, again, it's a two-part movement. What is under the ground, what is above the ground. And notice we'll begin with Through the Dark Sod, again, going back to poem 66 for the darkness. And then, again, as education, sitting there. This is, in other words, this is the powerful symbol. The lily as the symbol. Of course, think about the lily as a symbol or representative of, for example, a novice nun. Some have pointed that one out. And then we go to the lily passes sure. The lily is referenced in poem 74, 100, 247. When we get to 649, it will be the trick of lily. And then finally, when we get to poem 908, we'll enjoy one more time this use of lily. 'Tis sunrise, little maid, hast thou no station in the day? 'Twas not thy wont to hinder so, retrieve thine industry. 'Tis noon, my little maid, alas, and art thou sleeping yet? The lily, waiting to be wed, the bee hast thou forgot. My little maid, 'tis night, alas, that night should be to thee. Instead of morning, hast thou broached thy little plan to die? Dissuade thee, if I could not, sweet, I might have aided thee. When we study that poem, we will come back to this one. Notice, the lily will pass out of the dark sod, notice, sure, feels with her white foot, and then notice, no trepidation. We're going to go from no trepidation to all forgotten. No trepidation, and then her faith, no fear. Now, this will take us, obviously, to our study of Plato's Republic, especially Book 7 and the cave allegory. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. You guys will remember that in the cave, looking at shadows on the wall, the perception is all of this is real when in fact it is not real. And of course, to come out of the darkness of the cave into the light of the sun, one must overcome, what is it? Fear and pain, right? And I think here that she's playing the same game. And then, of course, afterward, which is to say, the transitional moment, right? In the meadow, right? From now we're going from under the dark sod to the meadow, swinging her barrel bell, go back to 167 for barrel, of course, pale greenish white color. The mold life, we're back to the dark sod of the first line, all forgotten. So we've moved in education from trepidation to a complete forgetting of the experience. And then the word now just sits off between two dashes. In ecstasy and dell. Now when we get to poem 757, we're going to come back to this study again. And this is the way she'll say it. The mountains grow unnoticed. Their purple figures rise without attempt, exhaustion, assistance, or applause. In their eternal faces, the sun with just a light looks long and last and golden for fellowship at night. And when we get to poem 1255, we're going to play around again with this idea. Longing is like the seed that wrestles in the ground, believing if it intercede, it shall at length be found. The hour and the climb, each circumstance unknown, what constancy must be achieved before it see the sun. The idea of dynamic growth is the point here. And I think that's the argument that she's making. The great scholar Wisher has said about this set of lines, quote, the darker the great enigmas, the brighter might the little candle of man's intelligence shine, end quote. In other words, all learning involves overcoming trepidation, fear, and pain in the life. At 2b, I love the before and after language. We've seen this in a number of her poems, and here we're seeing it again. At 3a, well, we've mentioned, of course, Plato's Republic 7, and I think that one works very, very nicely, right? And of course, that idea of you have to go to Hades if you're Odysseus to be able to escape from Hades, to be able to get home to Ithaca. The idea of you've got to go through the darkness to get to the light. Finally, at 3b, to own a poem like this, what was a time in your own education when you had to go through the trepidation to get from the dark sod to the meadow and the lily white? Thank you.